When Lady Diana Spencer married Prince Charles, she instantly became a cultural phenomenon.
Her global popularity not only boosted the image of the British royal family, but the causes she worked so tirelessly for. Today, the world pauses to remember the People's Princess, her incredible life and legacy 25 years after her death.
Lost but never forgotten. The reluctant royal adored by millions. Princess Diana was a breath of fresh air for the monarchy. Breaking the royal mould, she led fiercely with her heart, determined to make a meaningful difference in the lives of others.
HIV does not make people dangerous to know, so you can shake their hands and give them a hug. Heaven knows they need it.
I don't know what you thought of me.
Pretty amazing.
Chosen by the Queen to marry Prince Charles, Diana's fairy tale wedding was just as dramatic as her divorce.
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
Defying expectations, she rocked the royal family, from walking out in the revenge dress to smashing stigmas, and her public admission of bulimia, the People's Princess, was far from predictable.
It's always been my concern to touch people with leprosy, trying to show in a simple action that they are not reviled, nor are we repulsed.
Diana would no longer be queen, but she won over the public as a fashion icon, humanitarian, a philanthropist and mother. Her most precious and personal legacy, her 2 beloved sons, Prince William and Prince Harry.
I will fight for my children on any level in order for them to be happy and have peace of mind and carry out their duties.
Shining light gone too soon, it was 25 years ago today that the world went into mourning.
I, for one, believe there are lessons to be drawn from her life and from the extraordinary and moving reaction to her death.
Her memory and legacy living on through her children.
She was our mum. She still is our mum. You know, and of course, as a son, I would say this. She was, the best mum in the world.
I give thanks that I was lucky enough to be her son and that I got to know her for the 15 years that I did. She set us up really well. She gave us the right tools and was prepared as well for life in the best way she could, not obviously knowing what was going to happen.
Well, royal commentator Angela Mollard joins us now. Good morning to you, Ange. You were working for a British newspaper at the time. What are your memories of that terrible day?
Oh, I remember being woken in the middle of the night by my brother, incidentally, in Japan, who rang to say that she had died. I couldn't quite believe it. I was in the office by 8 a.m. It was a 15-hour day. Our offices were just across the road from Kensington Palace, so the flowers were starting to gather. And as in a newsroom, you know, that was the cover that day, that 80-page special edition. And how do you choose one photo to encapsulate a woman? That was one of the hardest decisions that day. But I just remember the newsroom, this eerie silence, because, of course, newsrooms are busy, jostling places. Richard Kay, our royal editor, had been the last person to speak to Diana on the phone, and he was absolutely ashen that day. I mean, it was just I'll never forget it.
Just
was
disbelief around the
disbelief, and these are harder news hacks, right? So that they're used to big news stories, but it's utter silence all day.
The Queen said lessons are to be drawn from Diana's passing. It's no secret that she was struggling with mental health issues. Meghan has opened up about her issues in this space as well. Do we think Diana would have been a support for her in this instance? It's hard. I mean, how do you know?
I think they would have managed it better. We're more open as a community about mental health issues. Diana was obviously suffering. We know that she talked to Andrew, well, she provided those tapes for Andrew Morton where she talked about having bulimia, about suicide attempts. I not necessarily think that the palace would have supported her if this was happening today, but there would have been a sort of environment where she would have sought psychological help far more easily. But as to supporting Meghan, undoubtedly, she loved those boys and she would have loved their wives in turn.
20 years old and thrust into that royal institution. Do you think she was just too young to marry into that? We hear so much about what happens behind the scenes and all that sort of pressure. It's a very strange environment, isn't it?
Oh, look, for anybody. I mean, Meghan was 36 when she married into that. Kate was 29. Diana was 20. I often wonder what would have happened if they'd had a 2-year engagement. If Charles and Diana had spent 2 years getting to know each other, we know from those early interviews they had virtually nothing in common. So it partly youth, but partly lack of commonality. Also, if those 2 years, if they'd had a 2-year engagement, the relationship with Camilla might have been flushed out there and then. They might have dealt with it. She might have walked away. I've always wondered what might have happened had they taken that time.
No social media back then. Yet Diana would have been one of the greatest influences on the face of the earth.
And she sort of was, in a way. Like, she would ring the newspaper I work for regularly with stories about herself. So had she had social media, that would have been a perfect mouthpiece for her. I think she would have handled it very much the way Kate and William handle it, where, and you know, it's such a powerful thing for the modern day royals, because instead of the photos particularly being delivered by media, they deliver them themselves. I think she would have been a proponent of it.
Diana always said that she was disgusted at the amount of tabloids that she was in. That was very much part of her day-to-day. What was happening on the other side of that street? What were the discussions like when it was like Diana saying, I'm in this too much, leave me alone, go away? What's happening in the media offices then?
Well, it depends who was... So she sold newspapers. That was the problem.
That's the
She sold them. And there was this parasitic, symbiotic relationship between press, palace, public and princess. So it was circular. It fed each other. She would want to have a picture in the paper because she'd want to put her point of view across. Charles was putting his. So they were briefing against each other constantly. They were using the press as an organ, and yet we were also complicit in that. And this, of course, was before the Leveson inquiry into phone hacking. Of course, there's regulations now which prevent some of the behaviours. For instance, we don't see pictures of George and Charlotte being dropped off at school. Back before then, when Diana's day, you might have seen those sorts of pictures on holiday, topless, that sort of thing. That is now completely forbidden. But in Diana's time, that was, you know,
it was fair game.
It
wasn't fair game, but it was considered fair game. There's been some criticism about the Meghan's The Cut interview, some criticism of it. The first 2 episodes of the podcast have been released. It is the 25th anniversary of Diana's death. The boys have said, though, they're not doing anything to market it. What do you think? What's your thoughts on this, the timing of all of this?
I think this is really interesting because this is how media has progressed. It's all digital, so you can actually time it. It's not like production issues on magazines. I think it would have been much more subtle to have brought out the podcast and to have had that interview drop tomorrow. I really do. I think just give it its space. It's something important. It's about her boys. It's her husband, you know, remembering his mother. I think that's a bit more important than what Meghan has to say.
All right, Ange. So you're still talking about it with such passion 25 years on. It was a very
you just
important,
never
a very
lose.
special moment.
I mean, of all the events I've covered, and it went for a week, remember, Larry? And then we had the funeral, and then for months afterwards, I was in part of an investigative team doing a part work on it. So it went for months, and still does.
Yes, it does.
It continues to this day. Thank you, Anne.
Thanks, Ange. Good to see you.